Welcome back to another episode of the Chicagolandians, a casual sports podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Cunningham, joined as always by my co-host, Connor Cunningham.
We're two brothers from the Chicagoland area who love exploring every corner of the sports world. Each week, we break down sports stories, ideas, and theories in a way that's simple and fun.
Whether you're a lifelong fan or just curious about the game, there's something here for everyone.
Welcome back to another episode of the Chicagolandians podcast. I'm your host, Connor Cunningham, joined as always by my co-host, Patrick Cunningham.
Hello, hello, hello.
On today's episode, we are joined by two very special guests today. Friends of the pod, roommates of the pod, Tyler Krawcyk and Samuel King. Guys, how you doing?
Doing great. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks, fellas. Really appreciate the opportunity to come on.
Of course, you guys are longtime supporters of the pod. We're just thrilled to have you on, and we know that you guys, above anything else, know ball, so that's why we're really excited to have you on, just to talk some basketball today. In today's episode, we're going to do a breakdown of the NCAA tournament. We're going to go region by region, talking about our picks, projections, where we think this tournament's going to shake out. Selection Sunday was yesterday. Guys, how are you feeling just in general about the tournament right around the corner?
You know, it's an exciting time of year. There were a couple major surprises with the bracket yesterday, and I know we'll get into it a little bit more. Major questions with North Carolina being in, and then major seeding questions with teams like Michigan and Louisville. But ultimately, really excited. Obviously, first four starts tomorrow from the time we're recording. So just very excited to see the ball tipped in Dayton.
I'm really excited. Probably my favorite time of year. First glance at the bracket this year, it seems very top heavy. I hope we get a lot of upsets. I don't think it's going to happen, but we will see.
Wow, not a lot of upsets this year, Tyler. I feel like I hear that maybe every year, and then kind of shakes out differently.
A lot of years, I'm the guy every year with my bracket. I'm trying to find that 12 seed, that 13 seed who's going to go far this year.
Yeah,
I just don't know who it's going to be because the 1 seeds are all amazing. The 2 seeds are all amazing. The 3 seeds, I think someone's a little fraudulent, which we'll get into that later. But I think this bracket is very, very top heavy.
Yeah.
I think a really important thing to note, too, coming off of conference tournaments and conference champ week, not a lot of bid sealers, which is kind of surprising. You know, UAB was in that game with Memphis for a little bit, and obviously Carolina wouldn't have been in that scenario. But very chalky conference tournament week. But I think in some ways that might lead to some more upsets. So I think I might disagree with Tyler there. But when you look at the bracket, I agree. It's hard to find some value.
Quick hitters overall. Auburn slated as the number 1 overall team. It's funny enough, they'll be playing the championship if they make it that far in Atlanta. So pretty close to, Auburn territory there. One thing that jumped out of the page is that the SEC is widely represented. 14 schools are in the NCAA tournament. LSU and South Carolina are the only 2 teams to not be in the NCAA tournament. I mean, what's going on there?
Well, it all started at the beginning of the year. I mean, the non-conference play, the SEC was head and shoulders better than everybody else.
Yeah.
You got these teams at the bottom of the SEC who made it, like Oklahoma, who started off the year, I think 13-0 or 14-0, and they weren't really playing anybody, but they were running through everybody. Arkansas, I think, really kind of squeaked their way in towards the end by just having some good wins. Personally, as much as I don't like the SEC being a Big Ten guy, every team that's in, I think, kind of deserves it because I think they have a very good chance of winning their first round game at least. Oklahoma has a tough matchup, but if it wasn't Dan Hurley and UConn, I'd think Oklahoma should be favored. But I honestly think the committee did a pretty good job with the SEC. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
Very, very interesting. Oklahoma slated as a 9. I think most bracketologists kind of had them in that last 4 in territory, which wouldn't be on that 9 line, but they were pretty safely in. And it goes back to really non-conference play. And then I think the conference helped each other out in the sense that, even though I want to say Oklahoma went 6-12 in conference play, you pick up wins against teams that the committee already really likes. It goes a long way. I think Texas might be the only major question mark.
Yeah.
But I think after watching them in the SEC tournament, they kind of played their way in. And in contrast to a team like Indiana, who lost to Oregon in the first round of the Big Ten tournament, it really comes back to the non-conference schedule that the SEC played. And then ultimately those teams helped each other out.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so let's get into it now. Let's start off. We're looking top left of the region. We're looking at the South. Some highlights here. We got Auburn, number 1 team in the country. They're slated as the number 1 seed here. We got Michigan State at the 2, Iowa State at the 3. Michigan, Big Ten tournament winners, slated at the 5, Texas A&M at the 4. There are some interesting points with this South region that come up. First and foremost, Sam, I know you're itching to talk about it, but UNC getting that play-in game. Feel like all you and Tyler were talking about this entire semester was how ass UNC was at basketball, and now I see them slated here to possibly have a tournament bid, which is, in my opinion, surprising. Michigan State being 5, that seems like an underseed for Big Ten tournament champions. And Iowa State, I know they have big question marks as well. Keyshawn Gilbert is injured. That's a surprise for a lot of people. So, Sam, I'll start with you. What are you feeling about UNC or kind of the seeding of the South region?
Terrible. UNC should not be in this tournament.
Yeah.
Now that should be noted that North Carolina, with the experience they have, still have some members of that Final Four team, RJ Davis being one, is huge. And UNC, conceivably, just looking at this bracket, especially with an Iowa State team that is hurt, the route to a Sweet 16 is there, albeit I don't think they will get there. But West Virginia should absolutely be in this tournament. We can't sit here and say that Bubba Cunningham recusing himself from the room is a legitimate excuse. The guy has a I think it was like $105,000 bonus if North Carolina made the tournament. And I understand there are other conference ADs that are on that committee that also left the room when their team was discussed. But you can't tell me that the chair of the committee and a blue blood like North Carolina, the name that comes with North Carolina, did not play an impact. They're 1-12 in quad one games, guys. Carolina time and time again proved that they are not a good team. And they are not an NCAA tournament team. And I'm just shocked. I don't think Indiana necessarily deserved to be in either. But if you look at it, like West Virginia certainly deserved it more. Indiana deserved it more than North Carolina. I don't know. I think it's a pretty consensus national opinion that Carolina shouldn't be in. But I just don't understand how the NCAA allows a sitting AD to be the chair for a committee that makes such important decisions.
So, Sam, could you provide a little more context for the uninitiated about this controversy? So the athletic director for UNC was involved in the committee with deciding the seeds for the bracket. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Not just involved, Pat, he is the chair of the committee. So the thought process is he leaves the room during any discussions about North Carolina. So he leaves the room and then they talk and, take votes and whatever it may be. You can't tell me that, you've been hanging out all weekend. They watch the games together. You cannot tell me that does not play a role. So you're telling me he comes back into the room and they say, oh, North Carolina is not in, like that leads sour feelings. It's a human nature thing that you want to make people happy, especially people who are kind of your boss, quote unquote. So I don't understand how you can't tell me that there aren't qualified people that are better fit because they don't have any, we don't have our refs in games have any affiliation to team. And this is the same sort of thing. I think it's inexcusable for the NCAA to do this. I mean, it's very typical of the NCAA. I mean, 111 out of 111 bracketologists had West Virginia in this tournament. Take that for a second.
100%, yeah.
It's a miscarriage of justice is the best way to put it, to quote John Ross.
I think about 27. I think like 27 of them had UNC in the tournament out of 111. I mean, I'm more upset just for the West Virginia players because I think they totally deserved it. I mean, they were 6-10 in quad one, very respectable, especially for a bubble team. And they're in the Big 12, playing better competition than UNC is day in, day out. Yeah, I think UNC kind of saved their season by playing Duke close in the ACC tournament and then kind of close towards the end of the regular season. Even though they still lost both those games, I think that just kind of gave the selection committee an out to be like, oh, okay, well, yeah, UNC could still be dangerous. And I will say they can still be dangerous, I think, just because RJ Davis is that kind of guy who can go 14 for 20 in a game, but he can also shoot you out of a game and go 2 for 22. Yeah. So,
well, one more thing to note that was really horrendous about it was one of the reasons they cited for West Virginia not getting in is because Tucker DeVries is hurt, who's been hurt since November. So they haven't had him all year, and we're sitting here, and they beat Iowa State without it. It is a complete sham. But Tyler's absolutely right. North Carolina still, I think, has a route to the Sweet 16. They still have dudes on that roster. I don't think Hubert Davis is a good coach. I think he's been able to kind of mask him not being a good coach, through guys like Armando Bacot taking him to a Final Four, but. Again, still been to a Final Four, still have guys on that roster been to a Final Four. North Carolina's still scary.
A couple interesting matchups to note. So first we got Louisville 8 seed against Creighton 9 seed. I think this is interesting. One, for the possible second round matchup that Auburn might have. They play Louisville. That game will be played in Lexington. It's kind of a home game for Louisville. Louisville's hot right now. Played Duke close in the ACC championship. Creighton as well, I think, is a solid team. Great three-point shooting team. Good defensive players as well with Ryan Kalkbrenner. He's that big-ass white guy who's been there forever. But I think another really interesting matchup is Michigan versus UC San Diego. Those Tritons, man. It's a fun mascot they got there. UCSD is a great-looking team, and Michigan, though, very hot right now, winning the Big Ten championship. They got some dudes on that team. Danny Wolf, say what you want about the looks of that guy or the hairy shoulders that he's got. The guy can play basketball as well. They got some great players there. I'm having the hardest time in this region picking that Michigan-UC San Diego game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first starting with that Louisville-Creighton game, Louisville being an 8 seed, I think was a shock to everyone. I guess the one consolation is that they get to play in Lexington, so it's kind of a home game. Something I want to note, so Louisville beat Clemson twice. Clemson's a 5. They're 24th in the net, 23rd in Ken Pom, 4 and 6 in quad 1 games. But more importantly, bracketologists. So Kevin Sweeney from Sports Illustrated, 6 seed. Joe Lenardi, ESPN, had him as a 6 seed. Jerry Palm, CBS, had him as a 6 seed. Mike DeCourcy from Fox had him as a 5 seed. So I don't think anyone on the committee uses the same metrics. And I think we all need a more streamlined process, because if you looked at Pat Kelsey in the reaction video, granted they were the 3rd team called or 4th team called with after that 116 matchup, but they were shocked. I don't think they expected to be on that 8 line. And, a date with Creighton is not fun. Creighton's a really weird team. I've been trying to figure out Creighton all year. I can't really figure them out, but they have dudes with experience. A couple years ago, made an Elite 8 run, lost to San Diego State. But curious to hear Tyler's take on that game, because that's a game I've been struggling to pick. I think I like Creighton as a better team, but it being in Lexington makes it very interesting.
Yeah. This game is one of the ones that I've had a really tough time with, because Louisville definitely got a raw deal with their seeding. I totally believe they should have been a 6, 7, maybe a 5. Not to beat a dead horse here, but back to the bracket matrix, 109 out of 111 experts, quote unquote, had Louisville better than an 8 seed, and 2 people had them as an 8 seed. And then for some reason, the selection committee chose them as an 8 seed. That astounded me. And then to draw Creighton, that is a very tough matchup, because Creighton's season, kind of like what Sam said, I don't really know what to make of this team, because they started off good, and then Pop Isaacs, who looked like their best player besides Kalkbrenner, got hurt at the beginning of the year, and I just kind of stopped watching them, because I was like, okay, they're going to be fine, but they're probably not going to do anything. Then they picked it up towards the end of the year, got to the Big East Tournament Championship, and this is going to be a great game, because it's 2 great teams who I believe have the talent to be a 6, 7 seed. And it being in Lexington is awesome, because it could seem like a home game for Louisville, but I'm interested to see if Kentucky fans are going to buy up a bunch of those tickets and just cheer hard against Louisville and go to Rupp Arena. And so, I saw a stat. Louisville is 4-18 in Rupp Arena. So, granted, those are against Kentucky, but it's tough place to play. That matchup intrigues me a lot. Sam, if you have anything else to say on this game, go ahead. I've got a lot to say about the Michigan UCSD game.
Other than what a way to open the tournament, because I can see this game being down to the last minute. Tournament absolutely got it right by setting that as the first game. But I think Michigan UC San Diego is a huge matchup. Connor mentioned earlier, we're not going to go too much more into seeding. Do conference tournaments not matter anymore?
Yeah, seriously.
Fellas, what are we doing? How does Michigan, who beat Maryland, beat Purdue, beat Wisconsin? Wisconsin's what, a 3? Purdue and Maryland are 4s. And we're just going to completely ignore that they did that, and then they're going to draw quote unquote hot 12. I don't know. That's a little bonkers to me.
Not only did they beat Maryland, Wisconsin, Purdue in the last 3 days, all 3 of those teams, they finished better than them in the Big Ten regular season, and they're still seeded worse than them. If this bracket came out 2 weeks ago before conference tournaments even started, I would be like, okay, that makes sense. And now that a conference tournament's happened and everything that happened, I'm looking at it, I'm like, conference tournaments just do not matter, in my opinion, to the selection committee, apparently. So, yeah, I think Michigan should be higher than a 5. But besides that, they got a terrible draw with UC San Diego. Not only did they get a 5 seed, they got probably the worst 12 seed to play. And then UC San Diego, too. They get a horrible matchup against Michigan because I don't think Michigan's that great, honestly. This whole season, they've been scraping a 5 from the skin of their teeth. But holy crap, they have two 7-footers that start, two very talented 7-footers. And I know Sam was telling me this like 2 weeks ago. Michigan is a nightmare matchup for anyone in the tournament, not in the Big Ten, because you don't see this on any other team.
Yeah.
Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden, I mean, how do you prepare for that? And UC San Diego, who I don't even think has played a power conference game this year. I think they played San Diego State to start it off. Mm-hmm. I'm very interested to see how they're going to respond to that. But something to note in UCSD's favor, they are one of the best teams in the country in turnover margin, and Michigan is, I think, 328th in the country in turnover margin. So that could come into play.
Tyler, who's your pick that game?
I've been going back and forth so much. I think I got to go Michigan, though.
Yeah.
Just because, they're two 7-footers, and I think UCSD is going to, the shock factor is going to take over, and they're just not going to know how to deal with this much talent, and because they just haven't seen it yet this year. I think I got to go Michigan here. The line is close, though. I think Michigan's only 2.5 point favorites on DraftKings.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Sam, what about you?
I'm also going Michigan. I actually feel a little more confident in this one than I think Tyler does. Obviously, there's that, you win your conference tournament, you get bounced early. I think Illinois proved that otherwise last year with their Elite Eight run. But I think Michigan really righted the ship. Some tough loss, 20-point loss at home to Illinois, who really going into that game was also struggling. But they switched their defense to, just switching every ball screen coverage, which I think has completely changed that defense. They're doing a lot of drop coverage stuff. But here's the thing. Danny Wolf can guard, has the ability to guard. I wouldn't say he, you want to get him on an island with a guard, but he absolutely has the speed to do so, or, to hold his own in that regard. Other thing I want to note there is UC San Diego has not seen two 7-footers. I think Michigan's a nightmare of a matchup in the sense UC San Diego's tallest player is 6'10" and is the only player on the team over 6'8", so not a lot of positional depth there. These refs like to call close whistle in the tournament because they're being evaluated to move on and officiate the next round of games. So you're going to see a lot of fouls early. I would imagine Michigan's going to go right into Vlad Golden right away. If UC San Diego gets into some foul trouble, who knows? And I really think this week of the Big Ten tournament not only helped them believe they could win these close games, but just kind of righted the ship, got some good mojo going into the tournament. And, a lot of people are picking UC San Diego. And I think when you get that much bulletin board material, Dusty May's been to a Final Four. This feels like everyone's going to zag over to UC San Diego. And I wouldn't be shocked if Michigan wins this game by 10 points plus.
Last teams I want to hit on in this South region is Michigan State. It's the 2 seed here. We got Tom Izzo playing in March. One of the greatest coaches that we have seen in my lifetime, one of the greatest coaches of all time. He has had a lot of success in this tournament. Michigan State has gotten real hot now. Jace Richardson playing like a lottery pick right now. We got a nice draw against Bryant, and then they'll play either Marquette with Shaka Smart or New Mexico, who I believe, does New Mexico have a Pitino coaching right now?
Rich Pitino.
Yes. Yeah. So interesting draw from them, and then they'll either play the winners of San Diego State, UNC, or Iowa State possibly. Is this going to be another year of Tom Izzo where we see him make a Final Four run? Does Michigan State have the abilities to make it out of the South? I feel like they're a common team you guys talk about a lot. Don't know if they have the top-end talent to be able to succeed in March, but what do you guys think?
I really like their route. Marquette's kind of stumbling into the tournament. I don't think, Marquette's been kind of underwhelming all year. Cam Jones has certainly played well, but outside of that, Marquette's been really struggling to find their footing. And I actually like New Mexico in that game. I don't know. I don't think New Mexico has the depth or the talent to compete with Michigan State. I think Michigan State's route to Sweet 16 is really good. And, ultimately, you're probably going to play an Iowa State or an Ole Miss in a Sweet 16 matchup. And I think both those teams Michigan State should beat. And then Auburn's kind of limping. 3 or 4 losses into the tournament. It feels like the dream route for Tom Izzo. And who knows? Sometimes when people want the storybook finish for Michigan State and for a guy like Tom Izzo, and sometimes it doesn't always work out, but the route is certainly there. You're a better coach in every matchup. I think if you were to see Auburn in the Elite Eight, Bruce Pearl's teams peak in February, and Tom Izzo's teams consistently peak in March. So the route's there. If you're a Michigan State fan, you couldn't have asked for a more favorable route. And I would go as far as to say that's probably the 1 seed you'd want if you were to right now.
If you want at one point in the rest of your lifetime to pick Tom Izzo to go to a Final Four, this is probably the best chance you're going to get. I agree. I like New Mexico against Marquette, but either way, whoever wins that game, I think Michigan State should take care of business in the round of 32 regardless. Iowa State, they were so good to start this year, kind of fell off a bit, and now Keyshawn Gilbert being out for the tournament. I mean, he's kind of the heartbeat of their team. I don't have faith in them. I actually think Iowa State's going to lose second round to Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss could be a very tough matchup for Michigan State. Chris Beard's a great coach, and they can just get hot, but the route is there.
Am I crazy in saying that Ole Miss might be the biggest obstacle?
Oh, I agree.
In this route?
I have Ole Miss beating Michigan State in my bracket. I might change that because I haven't finalized it yet, but as of right now, I do.
I have Michigan State Final Four, but that might be a little bit Homer Big Ten into me. But Ole Miss is a problem with Chris Beard for sure. Ole Miss just really struggles to finish games. Two, this is a Tom Izzo team that we haven't seen in a while. It's very reminiscent of that 2019 team. Drew Duke as their 1 seed that year, and obviously beat Zion and RJ Barrett. This just it feels like a really solid, well-coached group that has bought into Tom Izzo basketball. And I don't think the last couple of years Michigan State's played that way. And even with those teams, Tom gets them to peak in March.
I was just going to say, before we leave this region, I would like to go back to Auburn because I feel like we glossed over them a little bit. They're the 1 seed that I want to pick to get upset early, but they got a very favorable run, which I really hate because I don't want to take Louisville or Creighton to beat them. I think Creighton could do it if they end up winning, but I do think Louisville's going to win that game because I just think Kalkbrenner could kind of lock down Broom a little bit. But I mean, Auburn, they were dominant this whole season, but when you look back at their games, I mean, their non-conference was great. They beat Houston, they beat Iowa State, but they were down by 18 in that game against Iowa State. Iowa State kind of pissed it away. They beat Texas by 5. They beat South Carolina by 3, who was one of the 2 SEC teams who didn't make the tournament. They beat Tennessee by 2. They beat Georgia by 2. Yeah, these are all close games. Auburn won all of them, so you got to give them their flowers. I really want to take them to get upset, but I just don't know who's going to upset them. I'm thinking I might take Texas A&M to beat them in the Sweet 16, but I don't even know if A&M's getting to the who has
A&M has beaten them this year. People forget. A&M's got an interesting route with Yale. I like A&M in that game. I know people are kind of high on Yale.
I think people are hyping up Yale too much.
The Cinderella strike twice, probably not.
All right, real quick before we move on, Pat, who makes it out of this, the South?
Out of the South region, I also have Michigan State beating Auburn. Like you guys mentioned already, I think Michigan State has a favorable matchup to the Elite Eight against Auburn. With Iowa State, I think they are a kind of a weak 3 seed right now, especially with that injury. I think Ole Miss beats them in that game, and then I think Michigan State matches up nicely. And then, like you guys alluded to, I think Auburn is kind of limping into the tournament right now, not having a strong end to their season. I mean, I think per my research, I feel like that Louisville/Creighton game could be a tough matchup for Auburn in the round of 32. Of the 1 seeds, their second games, I think that might be the toughest game. But ultimately, I have Michigan State making it to the Final Four.
Sam, who you got?
I also have Michigan State. I think the route is probably the most favorable. I think a lot of teams are all bark, no bite. A&M is kind of like that. I think Michigan's a little like that. Although I have given Michigan their flowers. I just think Michigan State's route is very favorable, and I'm not going to bet against Tom Izzo in March.
Tyler, just real quick, who you got?
Give me A&M. I think Wade Taylor's going to go out. I think Wade Taylor's going to go out with a bang. I like A&M.
There it is. And I got Michigan State currently. This is still a rough ball of clay, my bracket right now, so it's very malleable. Let's move on now to the Midwest region. So we got Houston as the 1 seed here in the Midwest. We got Tennessee, Rick Barnes as the 2 seed. Hasn't been to the Final Four since 2003, and that was not with Tennessee. We got Kentucky as the 3. We got Illinois, ever heard of them, as the number 6 seed. Gonzaga as the 8. We got a couple interesting matchups here. But just to start, Kelvin Sampson, Houston, great team. Constantly high-performing team, but hasn't won the big one, has not cut down the nets yet. They've had 5 straight Sweet 16 appearances, 3 years in a row as a 1 seed, but have not been able to close the deal. Midwest here, I think as an Illinois fan, it's hard for me to not pick Illinois making a deep run, and despite some serious belt to ass against Maryland, I still think the Illini are back. It's all about that 3-ball and Kasparis, Yakachonis, but in my opinion, team to keep an eye on. But I think overall, I just want to start off, guys. We'll kick it to Tyler. How are you feeling about Illinois' draw through the Midwest?
So I love getting Kentucky as the 3 seed. I think they're definitely the weakest link among the 3 seeds, but getting past that first round is going to be tough. Texas is hot right now. They had a great SEC tournament. They make me nervous. And then Xavier is just a solid team, and that is going to be a great play-in game to watch. If you're not someone who typically tunes in for the play-in games, tune in for the Texas Xavier game because that is going to be a great game. honestly, whoever wins that game, I feel like it's going to be a toss-up against Illinois. But I do love the Kentucky draw. If we can get through that first round, I think the cards are in our favor against Kentucky, especially with Jackson Robinson being hurt out for the season. Lamont Butler, I think, is going to be back for Kentucky, which he can lock up KJ if given the chance. But I think Kentucky was a good draw.
Sam, what do you think?
I definitely agree. I think out of the 11s, and I know Tyler and I have kind of had a disagreement on this. Yeah, I like having a team that can't prep you, getting a two play-in game team. They're more concerned about each other right now than, they're probably not really scouting too much at Illinois. They'll probably have one assistant each on Illinois, and that's about it. Everyone else will be focused on Texas or Xavier. So that's big. To Tyler's point, Xavier and Texas really both played their way in towards the end of the year, and you got to give credit where credit's due. Texas beat A&M in the tournament in double overtime. Ultimately, when you're 6 seed, you can't really think too hard on the draw, but Kentucky, Jackson Robinson out for the year. Who knows how healthy Lamont Butler is? Is he kind of forcing himself to go in that game? I think the key is Illinois got to win that first game, but if they do, anything can happen in that Kentucky game. I think for a team like Illinois that's been so up and down this year, I like the draw a lot. I like being in Milwaukee first round, and I like being in Indianapolis if you can get there. And I like seeing Tennessee as the 2, a team that I feel like we can beat, and we've shown that we can beat. The path is, I would say, better than any other 6 seed. So in that regard, I'm extremely thrilled. And I actually think in a lot of regards, it's better than being on that 5 line. So maybe that Maryland loss really helps Illinois. I think UC San Diego would be a way worse matchup for Illinois than either of these two teams in Texas Xavier. So it's really interesting. I'm thrilled about the draw, though.
I disagree a little bit there with Sam. We were talking about it a little bit earlier. It's a toss-up. UC San Diego was a great team. I just think Texas being so battle-tested, playing the SEC all year, and Xavier's just such a solid team.
I'll tell you this, though. I want to see Texas over Xavier is where I'm at right now.
I'd agree. Yeah.
And I don't want to see Sean Miller. So that's kind of where I'm at. Sean Miller is very tested. And then also Xavier, I think, is on more of a heater than Texas is. I think Texas, they kind of stumbled into the SEC tournament and then played well. But if you're Illinois, I think you got to be really happy. I would not want to see VCU is another 11 seed that BYU's got to play. I would not want to see VCU at all. I would not want to see Drake. I think the only one I'd rather see is San Diego State, but even North Carolina, I wouldn't want to play. So it's tough. If you wanted a better first round matchup, you should have played better in the regular season. So for what the draw could have been, I'm thrilled.
Yeah, I agree. A couple interesting teams as well to highlight. We got Gonzaga, Mark Few. They're a top 10 KenPom team. Didn't necessarily get enough great wins on the resume throughout the regular season. It's kind of how they find themselves at the 8. I think McNeese is another interesting team that I saw. So their coach, I believe his name is Will Wade, if I'm not mistaken. Used to be the LSU head coach and then was fired for recruiting scandals. They have 57 wins in the past 2 seasons, so he's done a great job with the program there. He's probably going to find a promotion after this year. And the last one that you got to talk about is, of course, Purdue with Bryn Smith. Definitely an interesting program. We've seen a lot of Purdue as Illinois fans. Definitely had a great win against Purdue recently. But I think just looking at this bracket right now, either of you guys can jump in. What's a matchup that you think is the most difficult for you to pick right now, or the one that you're looking forward to watching the most, whether it be in the round of 64 or maybe in the round of 32?
I'm very interested in the Clemson and McNeese game. Will Wade, great coach. I would not be surprised if he's already on the horn with Indiana. Also, interesting to know, Will Wade actually went to Clemson. He's been talking about, he's a big fan of Clemson football. They never practice on days where Clemson football is playing. Pretty interesting, but I'm sure he's going to get his boys fired up for that game. I think I'm still choosing Clemson in that game just out of respect for the season they had. I mean, they beat Duke. They played great in the ACC, but, man, McNeese is scary.
That matchup, certainly I have circled for pretty much the same reasons. I think it's funny that both of those coaches are in, rumored Indiana job search. I've seen a couple of tweets saying winner becomes Indiana's head coach. So kind of interesting there, especially because there's a potential date with Purdue on the line after that. So that's very, very, very interesting. I think that's a tough matchup. I think Purdue High Point's also a tough matchup. High Point, I didn't get to see obviously much of High Point, but outside of last year, Purdue has had problems in March, and obviously narratives died probably last year, but also this is not a Purdue team with Zach Edey. And I think that's shown this year. I think Big Ten teams have certainly figured him out a little bit. I don't know. That'll be an interesting game. I just think that whole pod too. I think any one of those four can come out into a Sweet 16. So that's where I'm looking. I'm also looking at a potential Houston Gonzaga matchup in the round of 32. I think what a brutal draw for Gonzaga, and I think it kind of reminds me of when we drew Loyola in that 8-9 matchup. Same region, same part of the bracket too. Gonzaga is a top 10 team in KenPom, guys. And I personally bet against them in that WCC championship, and they looked like a Mark Few coach team. That'll be a really fun matchup to watch. So, as long as they get by Georgia, which I think they should, I think they're a much better team than Georgia. A Houston Gonzaga matchup would be much TV.
Could not have asked for a worse team to play in the second round if you were Houston. I mean, it's assuming Gonzaga beats Georgia. I think Gonzaga is going to make light work of Georgia. Gonzaga is a wagon that I do not want to get in front of right now. But I mean, we're saying, Gonzaga top 10 KenPom team. I mean, Houston's number 3, so it's not like they're going to roll over and die. Back to the
you never expect to see another, if you're a 1 seed, that you don't expect to see another top 10 KenPom team until at least the Sweet 16.
Back to the Purdue High Point game real quick. Whatever the over is in that game, I am going to be taking it because Purdue all season, they've had a great offense and pretty mid defense. High Point, they have the 25th best offense, according to KenPom, and the 227th defense. So that game is going to be very fun to watch. Absolute shootout, I'm hoping for. But at the end of the day, I think talent is going to win out, and Purdue's just going to take it pretty easily. But I'll be taking that over for sure.
Let's just get our picks here. Pat, who do you have coming out of the Midwest region?
So the Midwest region, I got a little bit of some chalk going on. I have Houston, Tennessee in my Elite 8 and Houston coming out on top. There were a lot of tough picks here. I think that Houston-Gonzaga game was a difficult one for me. And then Illinois-Kentucky, I do have Illinois winning that game. So I think that Illinois-Tennessee game might be something I want to look back over, but I might need to put aside some of my homer beliefs. But right now I have Houston coming out on top.
That's fair. Sam, who you got?
So I got Houston over Illinois in the Elite 8. I do have Illinois over Tennessee in that Sweet 16. Yeah. Definitely a homer pick, but I just think it's like that Tennessee game, granted it wasn't Champaign, but it would be in Indianapolis, Champaign East, some may say. But Illinois really let go of that game in the last 4 or 5 minutes, which was a problem all year. And then the game against Purdue a couple weeks ago felt like Illinois kind of righted some wrongs in that last 4 or 5 minutes and really took control of the game. I think they were down 5 with a minute 40 left and ended up winning by 8. So it's a homer pick, but Houston over Illinois in the Elite 8.
Tyler?
Yeah, I'm going to be chalk. I got Houston over Tennessee in the Elite 8. I'm going to be the cynical Illini fan here. I definitely don't see us beating Tennessee. When we played them earlier this season, they won on that last second buzzer beater. But also, it was a home game. Extremely loud in State Farm Center, way louder than I've heard it the rest of the season. I do think Tennessee will get to the Elite 8. And then in the Houston-Tennessee matchup, they play the same brand of basketball. Houston just does it better. And the knock with Houston the last few years has been they always play great defense. That's a Kelvin Sampson staple, but they just didn't have the guys. Cryer and Shed had been great, but they just weren't good enough offensively to get them over that hump. And this year, I think Houston has that. They don't have that go-to guy that Shed kind of was for them, but I think it's been better for them because they're more diverse and they've got shooters who can just knock down shots when they need them. Cryer's a great player. Sharp's great. Milos Uzan, too, going to be an NBA player. I think Houston's gonna get this region and would not be surprised if they won the whole thing, honestly.
No, that's fair. All right, before we move on, I'll just give my bracket picks. I'm not looking for feedback on my bracket, just kind of going to lay out my points. I know you guys talked a lot about that Illinois-Tennessee matchup. Didn't even consider that because I got Tennessee getting bumped in the first round to Wofford. I think they play a good brand of basketball there. And I got Utah State coming out of there too. So Illinois is playing Utah State, Sweet 16, good draw for the Elite 8. And I got Clemson playing Illinois in the Elite 8. And I got Clemson leaving the Midwest. So that's just how the cards are going to fall. I kind of just let my vision point me in the direction of the right bracket. But yep, that's how I
see it. If that happens, I would be the happiest person in America. So
real quick, I do want to ask Sam, what are your thoughts on the UCLA-Utah State game? Because we didn't really talk about that, and that's one that I'm having trouble with. Because UCLA, I think, is a better team, but Utah State started the season hot, and they're still a good team, and they finished, I think, a 4th in the Mountain West with a record.
I'm going to tell you this, Tyler.
Yeah.
Fade the Mountain West. Fade the Mountain West. Their coach has actually overperformed in his first season. Obviously, tough when you lose Danny Sprinkle, and then before that, you lost Ryan Odom to VCU. So Utah State's kind of become this springboard job to better jobs. I don't think it's a good league this year. Mick Cronin, too. I'm not going to doubt Mick Cronin. I agree it is kind of a toss-up of a game, but I'm going to fade the Mountain
I'm
West.
I'm going to take your word for it. I'm going to take UCLA.
There's the pick. All right, let's, currently slated in the Midwest. Let's take a quick rightward jog over to the East, where we have the top team. We're looking at Duke. And the main event, some have called him Cooper Flagg. He's got some injury concerns with that little ankle, so something to keep an eye on. We got Duke as the number one, Alabama and Mark Sears. He's playing his 12th NCAA tournament, but Alabama averaging 91 points per game this year. Very high-octane offense as well. We got St. Mary's as well at the 7, looking like a possible dangerous team, match up well against Alabama. Baylor at the 9, they got projected top 5 pick VJ Edgecombe as well. VCU, you mentioned it, Sam, earlier with Ryan Odom. I believe he was the UMBC coach in 2018 against Virginia, if I'm not mistaken there. Another interesting team to keep an eye on. We got Biberty at the 12, player to highlight, Zach Cleveland from Bloomington. Friend of Tyler, always welcome on the show as well. Last team we're going to talk about is Akron, the Zips. John Gross, ever heard of him? Former Illini coach, got that nice bright orange suit coat on. And Tavari Johnson is a Lions Township guy. Kind of local guy. We're over here in LaGrange Park, so wanted to shout that guy out. But overall, I think the main storyline is this Duke basketball team, number one team in KenPom right now. You guys have described them as a generational team. Maybe that was before the Cooper Flagg injury concerns, but I mean, the KenPom rating that they have right now, they're 2 whole points above Florida right now as the number 2 team. Some of the greatest statistical numbers that we've ever seen on this KenPom rating. They seem like an absolute buzzsaw here in the East. So I guess I'll start off. Do you guys think Cooper Flagg is available in the 16 game, or when do you think Cooper Flagg is going to be able to start playing in this tournament?
I saw something today saying that he's available for the tournament. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think they said he would play in that first round game. I wouldn't be shocked if it's very limited minutes, probably just more honestly conditioning minutes at that point. They'll take care of business. I'm not worried about the game if you're Duke. It's really, is he going to be healthy for that round of 32 game? But Tyler, I don't know if you saw anything different, or Pat or Connor, if you guys saw anything different on that.
Yeah, I saw he's expected to be available. I would be surprised if he plays more than 10 minutes in the first round, unless for some reason that's a close game, which my hot take of the week, that's not going to be a close game, regardless of if Cooper Flagg plays or not.
I'll switch my bracket real quick. Okay,
yeah. But I expect him to be full go in round of 32. I think, ankle sprain, it's definitely going to linger. I mean, ankles take a really long time to heal, but you tape it up, they'll give him some steroids, and he will be totally fine for 40 minutes of a basketball game. Yeah. I will say regarding Duke's injury status, though, in my notes about a month ago, I wrote down, take Duke to win your national championship, don't even think about it. And then in parentheses, I put, need Malik Brown, because Malik Brown was hurt at the time, but he was supposed to come back, and then he did come back. And then in the same game that Cooper Flagg got hurt, Malik Brown got hurt. And he's not a scorer for them, but he is the heart and soul of their defense. He helps them so much. And I'm not saying this is going to hurt Duke so much. I think Duke is still a Final Four national championship contender without Malik Brown, but it is definitely something to watch because he brings so much to the table that does not get put onto the stat sheet.
I think another team that we all have been kind of circling on our calendars is this 14 seed in the East. You might know them as the Montana Grizz. We know them as the Montana Riz. They're going to play number 3, Wisconsin. Guys, I know we've watched a lot of Montana basketball, Big Sky basketball. We've grown attached to it, those late 10:30 games. Is there a realistic chance that Montana can go dancing into the second weekend, or is that just a pipe dream?
There's not.
No.
I hate to say it.
Pipe dream.
I hate to say it. And I was the number one guy. I got our apartment onto Montana. I was the number one guy pushing for that, but there is no chance. Montana's not a good basketball team. They're solid in the Big Sky. They're going to get smoked by Wisconsin. And if somehow they beat Wisconsin, they're going to get smoked by BYU or ECU. I love Montana. I love the Grizz. I love Money Williams. But
yeah, what about Money Williams?
I will say this.
Not ready for gritty Big Sky basketball.
I will bet on Montana for fun. I think it's safe to say we're a Montana podcast here. But no, yeah, I agree, Tyler. There's not a realistic route. I think I don't have Wisconsin going past BYU. I think BYU actually gets to the Sweet 16 or even VCU in that game. But I think this is a better coach Greg Gard team than we've seen. I think, but it is important to say Greg Gard. There is the narrative can't win the big one.
Montana, Wisconsin, certainly a big one. Yeah.
I mean, regardless what you think about the Big Ten tournament, last 2 years can't quite get it done. Obviously, lost to JMU last year in the first round. I don't think Greg Gard's been to a Sweet 16. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong there, but for Wisconsin fans, frustration with Greg Gard is, we overperform, but we don't get anywhere. And I feel like this is, a different Wisconsin team with John Tanji, but it's kind of like the knock on Brad Underwood prior to last season is, can't quite get you out of a first weekend. And I'm not really ready to bet on Greg Gard getting out of the first weekend, but I am comfortable saying they will win that first round game.
Well, I've always heard, past performance is not an indicator of future results. That's kind of what I've heard. So I would just tell bettors out there, if you're looking for financial advice, don't necessarily fade the Grizz just yet. I think a region for me that's a little difficult right now is this Oregon, Liberty, Akron, Arizona. I feel like Oregon have been up and down the entire seasons, got the shit kicked out of them by Illinois without Kasparis. So I feel very hesitant about Oregon, and Liberty seemed like in the one game that I watched this year, the tournament game, they looked pretty solid as well. And Akron with John Gross seems like he can't really perform well as a coach when he's coaching in a big team. But with those Zips, they got good basketball. In Arizona, I feel like historically has struggled in the tournament. Between those two games, are those two games that stick out to you guys, or do you think it's just going to be chalk, Oregon, Arizona, that both advance to the round of 32?
Right now, I'm not overthinking it. I have Oregon and Arizona, and then Arizona coming out on top of that game. This was something that I didn't put too much thought into, and I'm open for ideas, but it is a bad sign when we get absolutely dominated by Illinois. That's something that really sticks in my head, but I think both of these come out on top. How about you guys?
Before you guys jump in, I got Liberty Akron coming out with Liberty advancing to the round Sweet 16.
I got to take a look at this
before
bracket.
you guys jump in.
Yeah, I'm going chalk for the first rounds, Oregon, Arizona. Liberty, I want to believe in them, but they just chuck threes and chuck threes and chuck threes. And if they're not going in, they're not going to score any points, but they're going to keep chucking threes. And I don't think that strategy is going to work unless they get hot and they shoot 60% from the field, from beyond the 3-point arc, which is basically the same as from the field because those are the only shots that Liberty takes.
It's wild coming from an Illinois fan.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But I do think Arizona takes care of business against Akron. I'm just running the ball there, not too much to think about. I will say in the next round, I'm leaning Oregon, and that has nothing to do with players. That has nothing to do with talent. Arizona is hot right now. Oregon isn't cold, but they're not hot right now. But Dana Altman in March is very good, and Tommy Lloyd in March is very bad. And I'm taking the coaching matchup there.
Arizona, the state, is also hot in March too, so that's something else to
keep an eye on. Yeah, going into the summer as well, very hot. Yeah.
Important to note that this game is being played in Seattle, so it'll be a home game for Oregon both rounds. So that's something to note there. Yeah, I'm all in on Dana Altman. Obviously, that Illinois game was bad, but like Oregon, they've had kind of the same type of up and down season as the Illini. But yeah, I like Oregon over Liberty. Same reason. Obviously, we shot probably damn near 60% from three that game. So I guess if it does happen, it could get ugly. But I would be shocked if Dana Altman doesn't have the boys ready to play, especially on the scouting report. Arizona Akron. We'll be rooting for Akron. I always like John Gross as a dude. Would like to see John Gross get to get a tournament win, but
get a championship. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, he's actually carving out a really good, career at Akron. I think this is their third tournament in 4 years, and they had a pretty long winning streak going into that tournament. And I think they lost someone in the MAC, but there's levels. I think
sure.
MAC is not a great league, but they at least in that conference tournament game, they beat Miami Ohio by 2 down the stretch, won that game. So, and Tommy Lloyd in March obviously had his own problems. Caleb Love also likes to shot chuck, but I think the talent on Arizona's the best team in that pod. Would not be shocked if Oregon gets out and gets into a Sweet 16. But I did go chalk. I went Arizona, Oregon, and then Arizona the Sweet 16.
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't think that round of 32 matchup's going to bust your bracket either because I think Duke rolls over whichever team wins that anyway.
Exactly. I wouldn't. If I were trying to win money in pools, I wouldn't focus too hard on just that stretch of the bracket. You won't lose.
Just take the Zips and lock it away.
Wait. So with the East here, there's one more team that I wanted to mention because I have this one team going very far in my bracket, and I want you guys to tell me if I'm on the right track or the wrong track. I have St. Mary's making a deep Elite Eight run in my bracket. I have them defeating Vanderbilt and then beating Alabama and then beating VCU. This is a part of the bracket that I think I need more consultation on. We got a lot going on that side of the bracket. Now, I've heard St. Mary's, not a team that's going to intimidate you walking out of the bus, but they are a defensive team that is going to slow the game down. Their Gonzaga game, I think it was like 58-56. They are not an offensive-minded team. They will force you to play their style of game, which I think is where it gets interesting with Alabama, because I think they either lose by 100 to Alabama, just getting absolutely boat raced, or they really slow them down with that defense and come out on top. What are your guys' thoughts on St. Mary's? Am I just completely insane here, or is this secretly genius?
I personally bet on St. Mary's to beat Gonzaga in that WCC game. Left a bad taste in my mouth. I think every year, though, St. Mary's always kind of does this where, they're the sleeper team and there's the West Coast team that no one really watched all year because their games tip off at 10 o'clock at night. And then, they beat Gonzaga in the regular season and then they never do anything in the tournament. I personally would fade St. Mary's, but again, I have a bad taste in my mouth, so Tyler might have more insight for you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think there's any reason this year is going to be different than any other year with St. Mary's. I honestly think the first round matchup against Vanderbilt was brutal because Vanderbilt
I picked Vanderbilt.
Amazing wins.
I picked Vanderbilt.
I have St. Mary's just because all of Vanderbilt's good wins come at home and they're big SEC games. When they don't have that crowd pop behind them, I don't know if they can take care of business. I'd like to talk about this whole pod actually, since we haven't talked much about it. I think Bama is also really good, and I think they're going to take care of business against St. Mary's or Vanderbilt. I like the argument you're making, Pat, with St. Mary's slowing the game down, and Bama is just the complete opposite of that. And in my head, when I have a game like that, I just go with the team that does it better, and that is Alabama, because they are the hottest run and gun team in the country. And then with BYU VCU, to go up on the bracket a bit, I am really high on BYU because to finish this season, they have been so hot. I think in the last like 6 weeks or so, they're top 10 in Torvik, which is similar to KenPom. Like they have ended the season on a very good run. VCU is one of those kind of mid-major teams that everyone's talking about as they could make a run, they could upset a good team. Very similar to UC San Diego, and I think VCU and UC San Diego both got brutal draws. I already talked about the UCSD one, but I think BYU is very good. And then I have BYU beating Wisconsin in the next round because what I alluded to at the beginning of the pod with some 3 seeds being kind of fraudulent. Kentucky, yeah, but everyone knows that because they're hurt. I think Wisconsin are such frauds. I think BYU is a much better team than Wisconsin. And kind of what Sam was saying, Greg Gard, I don't think has what it takes in March. And maybe I'll believe it when I see it. But until then, I'm going to keep fading Greg Gard. Pat, I honestly, I don't hate the St. Mary's pick. I do not hate it. I just think for bracket-wise, it's dangerous because they have a tough first round matchup. But if they can get through that and they can slow down Bama, they can definitely make it to the Sweet 16.
Appreciate the input. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. But I'll kick us off here. I'm going to go chalk here. I got Duke making it out of the East here. Pat, who do you got?
I also have Duke making it out of the East. It's Duke over St. Mary's, but I have to maybe reevaluate that pick.
I have Duke over Bama, a little chalky. Would not be shocked to see BYU beat Bama in the Sweet 16. The kind of same rationale Tyler just laid out a minute ago. As long as Duke's healthy, I like Duke in this region.
I think Duke has a better chance to win the whole thing than they do to miss the Final Four. So I got Duke coming out of this pretty easily.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to the last region we got here. We got the West region. We got Florida as the number 1 seed here. We got St. John's, Rick Pitino, Red Storm having a great season this year. We got UConn as well at the 8, Memphis at the 5, Maryland with Derek Queen at the 4, Drake, great looking team there at the 11, Texas Tech Red Raiders, number 3. And then we got great matchup, 7-10 matchup, Bill Self versus John Calipari in Kansas and Arkansas. So I think overall the West is definitely a very challenging looking region for Florida. I feel like it's kind of a brutal draw for the Gators, despite them having an awesome logo. We talked about it before. Definitely one of the best logos in college basketball. But I think St. John's having them there as well. poor offensive team, but they just play a good brand of basketball and they're able to win games. I think Rick Pitino is definitely making them outperform right now. But I think overall the West has definitely been the hardest region for me to pick. I feel like there's a lot of interesting teams, a lot of teams that could come out of this, even up to Maryland as well, I think could definitely come out of the West. But Sam, I'll just kick it off to you. What is your quick take on the West region?
Yeah, so let's talk coaches in the West. So Danny Hurley won the last 2 national championships. Bill Self's won 2 national championships. Rick Pitino's won 2 national championships. I know we make fun of Cal, but John Calipari's won 1 national championship. Porter Moser at Oklahoma's been to a Final Four. Todd Golden at Florida, probably one of the best up-and-coming coaches in the country, if not the best. What a region in terms of coaching. Very excited to see Bill Self versus John Calipari first round in the Kansas-Arkansas game. And then Pitino, I think they're America's darling. I'm very glad they're in a completely different region than the Illini because I would love to see St. John's. I don't think they'll get there, but I would love to see St. John's get to a Final Four just because Pitino's got to be the most entertaining coach in college basketball right now. So, yeah, I mean, my quick hitter is this is probably the region with the best coaches. I don't know, be shocked if there's another region with 4 different national championship coaches,
Seriously.
3 of which have won multiple national championships. So kind of a bonkers region in that regard.
Yeah, the fact that there are 7 national championships in this region is insane. And I like that you mentioned Todd Golden in that too, Sam, because he has done a phenomenal job at Florida this year. And Florida wasn't supposed to be very good this year. They come out 13-0, beating everyone in the non-con, killing everybody. Didn't really play anyone, but they're killing everyone. And everyone's like, oh, okay, let's keep an eye on Florida. Then they run through the SEC, and they didn't win it, but they won the SEC tournament. And Todd Golden has just done a phenomenal job at Florida this year.
I'd make the argument with Duke being hurt, even if Cooper Flagg is good to go healthy. Florida's probably the best team going into the tournament right now, which is brutal that they got the draw they did with Texas Tech and St. John's. Because I think Texas Tech, definitely the best 3. They're probably the 3 that you could make the argument could be a 2. If resume probably not quite there, but in terms of top 8 teams in the country, I would certainly put Texas Tech on that list. So
yeah, Texas Tech was the 1-3 that I did not want Illinois to draw in the if we were a 6, and we were a 6. So yeah, glad we got Kentucky and not Texas Tech.
Yeah.
But to break down some games in this region, UConn, Oklahoma, I am not going to go against Dan Hurley in the first round of this tournament. I think Florida will take care of business and beat UConn in the round of 32, but I will be shocked if there's a world where Oklahoma comes in and beats UConn in this game. What do you guys think?
I'm on board with that. I agree.
I agree too. I think we watched an Oklahoma. Did we watch an Oklahoma Texas A&M game recently or something? And it was just not great basketball. Would not bet against UConn for this one.
Oklahoma should not have been a 9 seed for starters, but also way too reliant on Jeremiah Fears, who could potentially be an Illini next season. But are we really going to trust what should be a high school senior against Alex Caravan and 2-time defending champs? Yeah. So I think it's UConn in that game for sure.
Sure. I think another interesting game to talk about is this Memphis-Colorado State game. If I'm not mistaken, Colorado State's actually favored in this game, which I thought was pretty interesting. I feel like Memphis in the past has been a frustrating team to watch in the tournament with Penny Hardaway, but I believe they're playing good basketball right now. But Colorado State is very high. I believe they're on a 10-game win streak right now. So these are the smart monies with Colorado State. Sam, what's your read on this game?
Brutal game to pick. I know I told Tyler earlier, fade the Mountain West. I don't hate fading the Mountain West here. I actually took Colorado State, open to changing. Dane Danger's been having a really good year with Memphis, former Illini. It's a pick 'em. I like Maryland out of the Sweet 16 regardless of that winner. I would say go with the betting favorite.
Yeah, I think you got to keep an eye on Tyrese Hunter from Memphis because he just got hurt. He's still up in the air on whether he's not going to play in this game. He's averaging 13.7 in a game for them, 3.6 assists. I think the fact that Colorado State is 3.5-point favorites shows that Tyrese Hunter is probably going to miss this game. If he's out, I like Colorado State. If he's in, I like Memphis.
I think another interesting team to talk about is Drake playing in the Missouri Valley. 11 seed, seemed like a strong 11 seed. They're one of the only 30-win teams in the bracket right now. Bennett Sturtz is their 6'4" point guard as well. He's averaging 19 a game, so definitely seems like one of the quality players in the West there. But they're going to go up against Missouri in the first round, and round of 32, they'd possibly draw Texas Tech, who I know you guys really love the Red Raiders right now. Do you think Drake has any chance at making it into the Sweet 16? Or do you think Texas Tech is going to be too big of an obstacle for them to get through?
Oh, yeah. I got Texas Tech in my championship, so they are going to deal with Drake. They're going to have no problem with Drake this year.
I took Drake over Mizzou.
Yeah.
Maybe a homer pick. Just don't like Mizzou, but love what Ben McCollum's done there. Ben used to coach at the D2 level, brought a lot of his guys to Drake, and the Missouri Valley is not a great league by any measure, but it's a fun league, and it's a league where they play a good brand of basketball in that league, and I think it gets them ready for tournament games. Mizzou is an interesting team just because are we over? They had good stretches this year in the SEC, and they've had bad stretches in the SEC play. So I don't really know what to make of Mizzou, but I think Texas Tech, JT Toppin playing elite ball right now. I had too much firepower over in Lubbock. So give me Texas Tech the Sweet 16.
Yeah, this is a game where if you like upsets and you want to call your shot on an upset, I think this is the game to do it. Just because Drake, very good team. And also because Texas Tech is going to win the next round anyway. So even if you're wrong, doesn't matter that much for your bracket. But me personally, I've got Missouri. I love what they've done this year. They were one of the worst teams in the country last year, and they turned it around. Have been great this year. They got the guys, they got the talent. Any team in the SEC, I'm just very high on the SEC this year. I think they're going to do really well this tournament. So I find myself taking them a lot against the Missouri Valley team. I think I'm just going to go with who's in the better conference there and take Missouri, not really think about it.
That's fair. All right. So, I mean, biggest thing here is St. John's. I know they're a really fun story with Rick Pitino. Do you guys think St. John's has the firepower to be a championship or Final Four team here? I know they have offensive struggles, but obviously it's hard to bet against a national champion like Rick Pitino. Sam, do you think they can put together a Final Four run?
I think they absolutely can. Everyone's got a lot of questions with their offensive metrics, but whatever they are with the 3-point percentage and other just, shooting percentage and offensive efficiency, the last two teams with as poor of offensive efficiency to make Final Fours were one of Pitino's Kentucky teams and Pitino's 2013 Louisville team. So if anything, it's shown that Pitino, despite the lack of offense, can get you there. I'm not afraid to say that I think Rick Pitino is probably the best coach in the region. Texas Tech St. John's Sweet 16 game will be an all-time classic game. I think it's got the potential for that, and obviously it could go any which way. It's tough to have to play Florida right now too. So the route, where the route for Michigan State is really favorable, I think the route for St. John's is very not favorable.
Yeah, I agree. They definitely can. They definitely can get to a Final Four. I mean, if you tell me that in the Final Four this year, we have Rick Pitino facing off against Tom Izzo, that would be great. But I do think Texas Tech is a better team. I think they will win. And because I think St. John's and Houston play a very similar brand of basketball, Houston just does it much better than St. John's. And in Texas Tech, when they played Houston this year both times, and they won one of them and they played them real close to the other one, I think Texas Tech is ready for what this St. John's team is going to bring them. But Houston is not coached by Rick Pitino. And that is going to be a big factor in this game. So I am super excited. I hope neither of those two teams get upset before that and ruin that matchup for us. Whichever team wins that game between Texas Tech and St. John's, having to turn around and play 2 days later against Florida, both of those teams are going to be so worn out by the end of that game. Just the way they play, just hard-nosed, grind-out games. Like this year in the NFL, to make an analogy, teams that played the Lions the next week, they would lose, and that held for like 9 weeks of the season. And I think it's going to be very similar in this game. Whichever team comes out is going to be so exhausted that I think Florida is going to win. So that kind of makes me wary with Texas Tech and St. John's, but it would be a great matchup if we can get it.
I think this is the strongest region in terms of top four seeds. I do have a chalk Sweet 16 here with Florida versus Maryland, Texas Tech, St. John's. Really hope that we see all or both those matchups, I guess, because all four of those teams play in the second weekend, because Maryland will pose problems for anyone they play. I like the Crab Five a lot. I don't think they have enough to get past Florida, but gosh, that region I think will be the most fun in terms of Sweet 16 games if we can get there. If everyone,
yeah. All right, Pat, send us home here. Pat, who are you taking to get out of the West here?
So out of the West, I got the Red Raiders. I got my boys Texas Tech coming out on top here against Florida. Tyler, I hear your comments about a tough game being worn down, but I think my boys going to take some good ice baths, do some good recovery, and going to be ready for that Florida game and come out firing on all cylinders, come out victorious. That's my pick, Texas Tech.
I got Florida over Texas Tech in that Elite Eight game, Florida to the Final Four.
Tyler?
I got Florida over Texas Tech.
I got Florida coming out as well. Okay, so I think we've all given our final 4 picks. Let's just talk championships here. If you guys are willing to share your brackets before, the tournament breaks open. But Pat, who are you playing in your championship, and who you think's gonna hoist that trophy, cut down the nets there for the March Madness?
Yeah, okay. So during the filming of this podcast, there's been some serious overhauls to this bracket based on your guys' comments. And, I think I still need to do another once over. But right now, the Final Four, we have Michigan State playing Texas Tech, and then we have Duke playing Houston. I have Texas Tech beating Michigan State, and I have Duke beating Houston, and then Duke beating Texas Tech to be my national championship. I know Duke is the most popular pick right now for national champions. And we'll see. I can't remember the last time the projected number 1 pick has won the tournament. I think back to the Duke with Zion team. It didn't win the whole thing. The young freshman team doesn't usually have great success, but I think this year they get over the hump.
That might be Anthony Davis, might be the last one, unless I'm blanking and someone can think of a later one. But I think it might be Anthony Davis, might be the last freshman one and done first pick national champion.
Sam, who you got?
So I got Florida, Michigan State, Duke, Houston. I got Florida beating Michigan State, and then Duke beating Houston. So Florida, Duke in the national championship, and then I have Florida coming out on top, which it's going to be, I think a lot of people are going to have that just given a lot of unknown with Duke in terms of injury, and then also way Florida kind of ended their year. So in terms of value pick, I don't know if it's a great value for bracket pools and whatnot, but can't really get over the way Florida's been playing in my head. So I got Florida.
All right, Tyler.
I've got A&M and Florida playing each other in the Final Four, and then Duke and Houston. I have Florida beating A&M. And then I think I got Houston beating Duke. I think this is Kelvin Sampson's year, with Indiana being a first 4 out team. The narrative is writing itself for this being Kelvin Sampson's first time getting over the hump, winning a national championship. I think LJ Cryer deserves it. And if Malik Brown was not hurt, I would be taking Duke in a heartbeat. But I think that at some point, I want to believe that is going to come back and bite them in the butt. So I've got Houston and Florida in my national championship, and I am taking Houston.
There you go. And I'll just hit my mine real quick. So I got Michigan State, Florida, and then Duke and Clemson. I got Florida beating Michigan State and Duke beating Clemson, and Florida as my national champions. So Sam, I think we're similar wavelengths here, but that's the 2025 NCAA tournament for you guys. I know there hasn't been a perfect bracket yet made, but I think amongst the 4 of us, we might have made some of the first perfect brackets. But man, I can't tell you how excited I am for Thursday. March Madness is one of the best weekends in the entire calendar year. I'm ready to just sit in front of the couch and just kind of rot watching college basketball. But you guys have any more points that you guys want to make before we wrap this puppy up?
Just to go back to UNC, that is ridiculous that they got in. West Virginia deserved it. Indiana deserved it more than them. I still don't think Indiana deserves it. Just utter bull crap that UNC is in this tournament.
Okay.
I think I just want to shout out those West Virginia boys, particularly Chester Frazier, former Illini assistant coach who follows me on Instagram. Y'all should have been in.
Chester Frazier, Sincere Harris, Amani Hansberry, not in the tournament this year. Brad Underwood in the tournament this year. That's all I'm going to say.
I guess my closing thought would just be, if St. Mary's makes the Elite Eight / Final Four, just where you heard it first. And that's all I have to say.
And I'll echo that with Wofford beating Tennessee in the opening round of 64. But yeah, I think that's going to do it. So I think that's going to wrap this puppy up. So I want to thank Tyler and Sam. Thank you guys very much for coming on today. I know there's not a lot going on right now, but I know you guys, this is your relaxation time and spring break. So I thank you for taking an hour and a half out of your day. This episode went kind of long. But I just want to thank you guys for coming on the pod and sharing your supreme levels of ball knowledge. We really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having us.
This is how I relax. If it's my relaxation time, this is how I relax. So really appreciate you having us on the pod.
Yeah. Well, that's great. That's going to do it for this episode. As always, guys, you can follow us on social medias. If you enjoyed this podcast, I think you can think of other people as well who would enjoy this as well. So make sure to share with a friend and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. But kind of awkward now to end it on this, but we end every episode with a bear down. So Tyler, I want to hear you say bear down as well. But bear down, baby.
Bear down.
We them boys.
Down, boys. Bear down.
All right.
Hell yeah.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Chicagolandians. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or wherever you listen. And if you want more Chicagolandians content, you can find us everywhere at Chicagolandians.